Uh, Takbir Fatima is the director of Design Aware. She has lived, worked, studied, and taught in Hyderabad, Dubai, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Chennai, and London. Takbir has a bachelor's in architecture from CSIIT School of Architecture and Planning and a master's in architecture plus urbanism from the Design Research Lab at the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London. Takbir is passionate about design research, digital prototyping, and computation. She aims to work on socially relevant projects. She is associated with various schools of design and architecture, including VIT University, the Boston Architectural College, and the Turnscape Academy, to name a few. She was also named the Emerging Architect of the Year 2016 by NDTV Design and Architecture Awards, and also Telangana Young Architect 2016 by the Indian Institute of Architects. Today, she is joining us to give us her take on innovations in interiors using glass. So I pass the podium over to Takbir now.
Thank you, Shivani. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this series. I'd like to share a few of our projects, just to give you a little introduction about our studio. It's called Design Aware. I started Design Aware when I was a student at the AA, and then later brought it with me to Hyderabad. And now we have many different locations, mainly in Hyderabad and Dubai. That's where we operate out of. So this is our studio in Hyderabad and in Dubai. And unlike a regular architecture studio or a design studio, we have Design Aware has kind of become an incubator, which births many other initiatives. So everyone in our studio, all of the people who are members of our team are all kind of entrepreneurial in nature. So they have started their own initiatives, and Design Aware has they're kind of spin-offs to Design Aware. So we have many other initiatives that have come up over the years by our core team as well as other team members. And what's really interesting is that the word Design Aware, it kind of reminds you of designer wear. So that's actually where we began. So I started. This was back in London when it was a winter vacation, but I was kind of stuck there, and I started to. We had access to the digital prototyping lab, so I started to experiment with fiberglass, which I found to be a really interesting material. It's such a versatile material in that even though you get it in sheets, you can laser cut it to layer it and sort of stagger the layers, and you have this really ephemeral kind of quality to it, which is really interesting. And what's even more interesting is that if you add light to one edge of it, due to the fiber optic quality of the material, all of the edges get lit. So anything that's etched and cut that glows and gets lit. So initially I was experimenting with a lot of wearables, and then started to get into the design of different products with this material, because it has so many qualities to it that you can explore. It has so much potential to it. So on the left side, you can see that this is a pendant light that we came up with, and this is the work of one of our early interns, who was a student of product lifestyle accessory design from NIPT. So she explored all of these different products. This was inspired by terrain, the desert terrain, and it's a business card holder, or you could use it for many other purposes. So whenever we look at any kind of material or any kind of system or way of working, we do it in a series. So you can see that we've done it with the design of wearables and then products, and then we were asked to conduct some workshops. So this is part of a workshop series that I created called the Fractals Workshop. I've been teaching this for over 10 years now in different schools of architecture all over India and all over the Middle East. And also since last year, I've been teaching it online as well. So this is the latest Fractals Workshop, where we had the opportunity to do an in-person workshop. So this was after a long time of many iterations of doing it online for the last 2 years. We had the opportunity earlier this year to conduct this workshop at Kerala State Institute of Design. And it's a really interdisciplinary workshop because there were students of interior design, product design, industrial design, and graphic design, all coming together and working on their sort of design systems, which are inspired by fractals. So what I'd like to point out here is that the Fractals Workshop, from the beginning, when I first started it, laser cutting and digital prototyping was not very widespread in India. And so I had to adapt that workshop to be able to fit into the budget and into the resources that were available here. So we used to use a lot of disposable material. And right now, with this workshop, we had the opportunity to again get back into digital fabrication, and we explored something that we've been doing in our studio. So a lot of projects we do in our studio are they run parallel to commissioned work by clients, self-driven or self-initiated research within the studio, and also our education initiatives. So this kind of sits at the sort of intersection between all of these different approaches. So with this workshop, students were required to design their own interlocking units. And this is again from a long line of research that we've been doing with many different materials. And with fiberglass, it's much more interesting because you can add light to it. As you can see on the right side, the students have added light, and you get a very different kind of glow to it because it makes it all the more three-dimensional. And these are units which are interlockable, and then you could dismantle them and put them together in many different ways. So that was the whole premise of the workshop, where you can come up with certain rules of aggregation. You can dismantle the systems, and then other teams who, you exchange the units that different teams are working on. So one team designed one unit, another team designed another unit, and then they exchange them, and they sort of try to put them together in different ways. So it's kind of a bottom-up sort of process, the same kind of process that happens in nature. So another detail of this material, and why I'm highlighting this is because this is kind of reminds us of this other project that we were commissioned to do by Rajiv Gandhi International Airport. This was the design of a business center. It's almost like a kiosk where, it's an information center where you could check your email and you could make a phone call or charge your phone. So this was supposed to be, this is a proposal. It didn't get built, but what we designed was almost like an X-ray of a building. So rather than making it an opaque structure, we wanted to make it a really transparent structure with many layers to it. So we used the same material, fiberglass, and that was our proposal, where we could light the edges, and then all the edges would glow, and everything else would be really transparent. The way that we derived the form of it was from a study of the different flight paths and the takeoff and landing angles of airplanes, because it was supposed to be at the airport. This is some of our sort of prototypes that we did. So it's not necessary that we use digital fabrication for prototyping. We also do it by hand sometimes when it's manageable. So these are, just let's say foam board. So these are foam board pieces which we just cut, and you can see all the numbering that's going on there, and all of the different pieces and the assembly. And then we also laser cut a smaller section or a smaller scale model of this design in the same material, fiberglass, but of course smaller thickness, and added light to it to see how it would look. So we wanted it to kind of glow from a distance, so it has a more sculptural quality to it, rather than being visible as an opaque box. We wanted it to be visible as something that's glowing in the distance, and then as you approach it, as you walk towards it, you're able to see it more and more as an opaque object. This is another project that is really, it's a really tiny project, but it's something that we packed a lot of experiments in it. So this is also quite close to our hearts because it's a local ice cream brand called Melting Moments in Hyderabad. And this was a very old ice cream brand, and they wanted a new, they wanted new branding, they wanted new sort of, a new look to it, and they wanted to start a new ice creamery or ice cream parlor. And this is a very tiny space in that it had about 650 square feet of interior space, and the rest of it was kind of an open space in front. So with this project, we sort of expanded the scope of work. What is an architect or an interior designer? What is their role? So we sort of try to redefine the role of a designer and question what role we would play in this project. So you can see that here there is a canopy of glass that we attach to the front of it. And this is a butterfly truss. So instead of being sloping outwards, it's sloping inwards. And so there's a gutter in between. So it's a skylight, and it's a sloped roof, which provides shelter from the rain, and it also passes on the water through this gutter. And then there is this floating counter. So that's another thing that we experimented with, which I'll be showing you later. So this is the canopy that we created. They wanted to extend the exterior by about 5 feet. So the canopy is about 10 feet in width, and it slopes towards the center like a butterfly or like an open book. And that's the process of getting it installed and fabricating it. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to reevaluate the role of an architect or a designer in the project. And in this project, we really expanded the scope of our work by also executing the design, because it was such a small project. And there were so many experimental things in it, we knew that somebody else would not be able to take that risk and execute that. We not only expanded the scope of our work, but also the scope or the footprint of the project. So we also designed the exterior, the landscaping. We also painted the pipes on the left side, you can see, and we painted the rest of the building as well. This is the view from above, the balcony above. So this is on the ground floor, and the upper floor is just a storage space. So we climbed up, and the view from there is really interesting because half of it shows you the interior and half of it shows you the exterior. So that's the view of the butterfly truss from the top. And also you will notice that, the sort of graphical nature of the interior design here. So it's kind of black and white with stark sort of pops of color. The brief was that they wanted to have a retro look to this ice creamery. So obviously the retro diner that reminded us of was the black and white checkerboard flooring, but with pops of color. And instead of going with the regular, diner colors, which are red, we decided to go with shades of pastel colors, and we have these pops of color everywhere. And you'll be really interested in knowing that these colorful tiles are not available so readily in the market. So what we did was we took toughened glass. So those colorful tiles are made of glass. So we took toughened glass and we had it painted on the back side and then installed by the tile layers. So the rest of the black and white are regular vitrified tiles, and then only the colored tiles are made of glass. And this is the floating counter that I was talking about. You can also see it from above. So you can see that the counter just seems to be floating. It has no support anywhere, except on the left side. You can see that it's got a little bit of support from the wall there, but the entire floating counter is supported on the glass wall. So the way the glass wall or the glass, the front has been designed is that it has a groove in it, and this counter just goes, and the counter also has a groove in it, the wooden counter, so it goes and interlocks into the glass, and that's how they sit together. And until we did it, nobody knew whether it would work or not, or whether the glass would crack So that was something that we experimented with, and it proved to be a very, successful experiment, because we had people jumping or standing on the glass and on the counter, sorry, and then checking whether it would break, and it didn't break. So this is the view from within. So what's really interesting about this space is that, there are lots of old, huge trees in this area, and you can, when you're sitting under the canopy, you can, on that floating counter, you can have your ice cream. It could be a sunny day, or if it's raining, and a lot of us in India like to have ice cream when it's raining too, right? So when it's raining, you're having your ice cream while it's raining over you, and you're not getting wet. So ideal way to have ice cream. We work with a lot of prototyping, as I had shown earlier. So this is the feature wall that we did in metal. So this is the prototyping process that we did in 1:50 and 1:1, full scale prototyping, and then sort of translated that into metal. So every time we design anything, it's kind of, instead of giving drawings, we like to give models. And especially, scaled models or full scale models, because we see that the fabricators understand the 3D models much better than they understand the drawings, and they're able to translate it easily. So that's another view of the space from the inside. So you can see that, even we wanted to give it a kind of European bistro sort of look, even the outside. So you have the greenery on the outside, the shrubs, and little bollards that we designed. So this is the execution process. You can see the floating counter there being installed, and then of course light plays a very important role in any project, especially in interior design. That's our team at the moment, at that particular time, who worked on this project together. I love this picture because you can see it kind of cuts through the floating counter, which really exposes the way it floats. So, and also it shows you the butterfly truss. It's really an interesting image. And that's the view from outside. So we have layers of light. So even exterior lighting, something that we did. And also we lit the facade of the building. So a lot of the light that's falling into the building is coming through the glass. So, instead of having all the lighting indoors, we decided to keep some of the lighting outdoors, and you have the borrowed light that's coming from outside into the building, because there is glass there. So we didn't have to have a ceiling or have any light fixtures which are visible. So the light would just come from outside, just like the sunlight comes through the glass. And also these bollards that you can see, the geometrical sort of geode type bollards, we have light underneath there as well. So you have this diffused light that's coming out from there. This project has been featured in multiple, magazines and multiple online portals, including Design Detail magazine, Inside Outside, and it has also won in 2019. It has been the platinum winner of the Berger Architecture Ideas 5.0 competition by the Festival of Architecture and Interior Design in the restaurant interiors category. This is another project that is now under construction. So with this project, I think what was really challenging was the site, the shape of the site. This is a residential project, and it's located in Film Nagar, Jubilee Hills in Hyderabad, which is a high, sort of hilly part of the city, and beautiful views from there, but also really winding roads and skewed kind of sites, as you can see. So the plot is kind of a parallelogram, and this is another way that we do prototyping, where we use a lot of found objects, and this one was, just stacking of stapler pins, as you can see. So the reason why we did that was because the site was a parallelogram, so we had to, how do we cover the most part of the site? So we started to slice the building in that way, and then we were able to create a much bigger footprint. So the lowest floor has the smallest footprint, and there are overhangs of 3 feet at every level, and also a stepped facade. So you have every floor is bigger than the floor beneath it. So the biggest floor is on the top and the smallest floor is on the bottom. So kind of a flip of the way it usually is. So these are some of our explorations, and that's the final prototype of the way that the building would be. So because of that parallelogram shape, we had two opposite angles, acute angles. And so we had to create it like a stepped kind of floor plan. And at every level, it increases by 3 feet in the overhang. And you have a 12-foot cantilever at the end. So that's the sort of design of the facade. We also did the interiors, but I'm going to focus on the facade itself. And the reason why I'm showing this is because it's a glass facade, floor to ceiling glass windows, but we created a layer over it. So you have a layer of these louvers, which are rotated at different angles. So they allow certain, quantity of light to come in, and also they provide privacy. So that's one way of, it doesn't have to be a glass facade, doesn't have to be just purely glass, but it can also be layered in many ways. And this is a generative sort of parametrically designed facade in that, it's data driven. So you can see that we identified the programmatic makeup of the spaces within each of these spaces of the grid. So you have, if you have a pool or a green space, then the percentage of openings is more. If you have a bedroom or a dressing room, the percentage of openings is less. And the percentage of openings is dependent on the angle of rotation of these louvers over the facade. And some of these, it's a dynamic facade. Some of these are openable and some of these are closable. So you can actually, it's kind of almost like a smart facade that can be operated using your phone. So it depends on what time of day it is, when you want more privacy, when you want more light, you can open and close these louvers as you wish. So that's how it looks. These are UPVC louvers. So the entire, all of the floors are completely glass, but they're covered with this layer so that it provides shade and privacy. This is now under construction. So we started something called Build-A-Ware. As I said, Design-Aware gives birth to so many other initiatives. So Build-A-Ware is one of those initiatives where we decided to take the construction, the execution process, the fabrication processes that are involved in our experimental projects, and we take control over those processes so that we can deliver a better quality output. And also, it's really difficult for other execution teams to understand some of our design experiments, but we can understand them and we're able to execute them as well. And finally, this is a project that is really, I think, what we are really well known for. This is the Kolkanda Fort in Hyderabad. And I love this image because it has both our natural and our built heritage in one image. So you have the Kolkanda Fort, and then in the forefront, you can see the rocks, which are indigenous to the Deccan Plateau. So these, granite is the rock that is available. And this is sheetrock. These aren't boulders, which can be removed, but sheetrock, which forms part of the mountain. And it's also the same rock that has been used to build the fort. So the rock formations are more than 250 million years old, and the fort is about over 800 years old. This is the site that we were given, that's me on site. So we were asked to design a charity school for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. And the site was located inside the Kolkanda Fort. So this is our site, which is really hilly and really, very difficult terrain, highly contoured. And on the left side, there's like a cliff that divides the site into two parts. And on the upper side, you have a lot of existing trees. So we wanted to, whenever we do any sort of design, before we start the process, we outline our principles that will govern the project. So we can change details, we can change, things that have consequence, aesthetic consequence, but we don't change the principles that are guiding the project forward. So in this particular project, our principles were that we will preserve the natural features or natural elements of the site, including, preserving or sort of safeguarding the trees from being felled. and also the rock and the existing natural contour or natural terrain. And also these trees are significant because a lot of the students, before the school was built, they had an informal school that was just being run out of a large hall. So they used to sit outdoors. They used to sit under the trees and learn, which is our traditional Indian system of learning. And even though this is in a metropolitan city like Hyderabad, the children live in this area and they live on the top of the hill. So they are used to climbing these rugged, the rugged terrain and the rocks, which is really interesting to note. These are some of our explorations with the terrain. When we started to excavate, we noticed that there was a lot of rock that could not be determined before. Even through our extensive site surveys and geological surveys, we couldn't really profile the rock very much in detail. So we had to design as we were constructing as well. So the site itself really dictates the design. So the building sort of seems to grow out of the site. So the site, it's a really tight, tight, low rise, high density neighborhood context. And then within that, you have these row houses with shared walls, and they're all courtyard houses. So the ventilation has to be done from above. So these are things that we took into note when we were designing. And another thing is that because it's a hilly terrain, one entrance to the school is from, let's say if we call it 0 level, then the other entrance is from the 2nd floor, which is about 6.5 meters or 20 feet. So, so you can enter the school from below as well as from above. So that's how the school situates itself in this very tight context. One entrance from the left side you can see, and then you have one entrance from the top if you go winding around and you climb up. So even the playground was an existing open space. So on the left side was that really hard terrain. The playground was part of this sort of a box of soil created by retaining walls. So it was a flat space. And then on the left side was the cliff. So we could very easily have built on the playground, but instead we decided to build on the more difficult part of the terrain because the playground is a really big asset. As you can see, there's hardly any open space in this area, and most urban schools in Hyderabad don't have a playground. They have to use the street, they have to block up the street, or they have to use the terrace. And so the playground was really valuable to us. So here you can see, I think what's important to note is the skylight. So that's what I'll be focusing on. The skylight is a geometric skylight that we designed computationally, and that tops off the top of the school, the upper level. This is the floor plan sort of shrinks and grows in response to the rocks. So that's how the floor plan or the floor plates are, and we call them lower ground, middle ground, and upper ground because each of the levels touches the ground at different parts. So that's the cliff, and you can see that every level touches the ground. We also took cues from the local context. So as you know, neighborhoods and the houses in the neighborhoods in India are really brightly colored, and they're self-designed and self-built. So we took all these colors into account when we were designing, and we decided to use primary colors with orange and apply it in a very controlled manner throughout the school. So you can see that there's pops of yellow, blue, green, and orange, and red. And also this is a model that we did in fiberglass, our favorite material. So a combination of laser cutting and 3D printing. This is on display at the permanent exhibition in the Hebei Design Museum in China. This is the facade. So this is a project this is a green building. So the project does not use too much of glass, but it uses it where necessary and where it really makes a difference. So the entire project or the entire school is a really low budget building because it's a charity school. So we had to keep it not just low budget or low cost in its execution and design, but also low budget when it comes to the maintenance. So we also have to think of the future life of the building as architects rather than only until the construction process. So in the future life of the building, the walls remain completely raw and unfinished because that would bring down the maintenance and you wouldn't have to keep painting them again. So that also creates a really stark contrast between these colors and the cement walls. And you can see that the rock comes into the building. So it's been taken into the building side of the cliff. This is the staircase that cuts across the entire, all three levels, and then it goes up. So you can see that there are skylights. So there are two atriums on either side. They almost remind us, especially this space, which is a bit narrow, reminds us of the courtyard house, which used to exist here before. So you have light coming in from the top, and because we have shared walls with the neighboring houses, we had to create opportunities for ventilation from the top rather than from the sides, because we couldn't have any windows on either side. And this is one school which was actually occupied before the construction was completed. So being a charity school, it was the need of the hour that they needed the space immediately. So the school started to be inhabited and used by the students, and there was no skylight above. So, you know, the rain used to come into the school, and the children used to play in the rain inside the school. And then later, when the funds were raised, that's when the skylight was fabricated. So this is a geometric, this is kind of our, you know, initial design process. We start with a little bit of sketching, but we very quickly go into prototyping. So we did this 1:5, I think, was the scale of this model on the left side. One of our interns worked on this model of the skylight. So the entire skylight is 80 feet long. And as I had mentioned, a lot of the design decision making and a lot of the work, technical work, happened on the site while construction was going on. So even with this, you know, we didn't have any formal drawings. We had our structural engineer there showing the fabricator what kind of truss is to be used. Instead of using real drawings, he just sketched it out and he showed it. And on the right side, you can see the prototype. So the model was used, and the same model was taken as a reference for measurement and directly to fabricate this entire skylight. And it's a repetitive kind of modular sort of skylight. So this is the process, and this is the glass being fixed. So for the glass, they had to create each pane, you know, there would be slightly, you know, a few of difference in the measurements because it was made by hand. All of the welding and the metal work was done by hand. So, so they had to measure each section individually, and they had to create, using MDF, they created the triangles in 1:1 scale as stencils. And then they sort of outline them into the glass, and they cut the glass. So each glass pane might be slightly of a different dimension because of human error. And that's the view from above. So the reason why we use this glass skylight, as I mentioned earlier, we could not have any windows on either side. And you can see that on the side of the building, we all have shared walls. And so the ventilation and the lighting had to come, the natural daylighting had to come from the top, from the center, and this illuminates all parts of the building. And you can see that we preserved the playground. There was an existing mosque there. So everything was pretty much, the playground was preserved so that it forms the sort of the lung space. And there's another school on the other side as well, which is a private school. So there are quite a few schools in this area. And yeah, you can notice the way the skylight looks from different points of view. It's a really dense and unplanned sort of settlement, which is, you know, more than 800 years old within the walls of the Kolkanda fort. This is how the skylight looks from below. So pretty repetitive, but the shadows that it casts and the reflection, it's quite interesting to see. And also, this is not a completely enclosed space. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of natural ventilation. Every space is completely lit naturally and naturally ventilated as well. So there's a lot of passive cooling. So this wall on the left side is a perforated wall. So there's cool air coming from there. So the skylight doesn't really, heat the space within. So that's the perforated wall, and that's the skylight, different views of it. So yeah, so this is the wall that brings in cool air from the north. And so it's not a complete, enclosed space. It's a semi-open space. That's how it looks from above. So you have this kind of a narrow space, and then you have a wider space, and the skylight connects both of those spaces on top. And that's how the school situates itself in the greater context of the Kolkanda fort. This has been a really popular project in that, we've had students of architecture and design, design enthusiasts, and architects from all over the country who used to visit the school almost on a monthly basis. We had a roster where we used to guide them around the school. Some of our interns used to take them around the school as well. So we had a lot of people coming for a case study or to visit the school. And it's kind of become a landmark for architecture students in this area. It was also featured on TV a couple of times, but since 2020, of course, all that stopped. So we decided to share a kind of walkthrough, a remote walkthrough of the school. I just put a GoPro camera on my head and walked through the school. So you'll be able to see that on the Virtual Design Festival by Design. So we were the only Indian firm to participate in the Virtual Design Festival. And that's there on YouTube. You can see the tour of the school remotely. The school is also a green building, as I said. It's been awarded the Silver Award or Silver Rating by the Indian Green Building Council in 2018 because it has, because of the respect to the existing terrain and also the natural ventilation. So everywhere, I forgot to mention earlier that we have lights, artificial lights everywhere, but they're never turned on. And a lot of times there are no bulbs because of all the daylight that's coming in. And most recently, something that we're really proud of is that the school was published along with so many other works of architects that we admire in this book called the Rethink Design Guide, Architecture for a Post-Pandemic World, in the section on schools as a case study for how schools should be designed in the post-pandemic future. So it's published by the Royal Institute of British Architects. And we continue to be associated with this project even till today.
Thank you, Architect Fatima Takbir, for taking us through such an informative presentation. It was very interesting to see how your designs are not only responding to your clients' needs, but also to the culture, social, and environmental context of the place. I have a few questions that I'd like to go ahead and ask you about your presentation. So first, let's start with how, apart from customized designs for individual clients, your firm DesignAware also dwells into self-generated initiatives as a part of your research, which you apparently design and build at the studio. Can you please talk about a few of those initiatives?
Right. So what we decided was that, instead of relying entirely on commissioned projects, we also wanted to do something that was self-initiated or self-driven. And a lot of times architecture is a really slow process. So part of that process is creative, and the rest of it is really technical. So during that time, we want to do something creative. So that's when we filled that part of the time in those initial days with designing, as I'd shown earlier, the lamps, and we also do furniture. We do a lot of other products, puzzles, and many other things like that. So it's something that is it's a creative outlet for us, and it's sort of self-initiated. It doesn't require a client, but it's more of a product that we're designing and we're fabricating all on our own.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to the ice cream parlor that you've designed. So how different is the design of a skylight? How is it different from the design of a facade glass? And how do you plan your interior spaces around these features?
So everything is really holistically planned. So everything is like, it's like a puzzle that fits into each other. So it's not really that we design the skylight and then we design the interior spaces, but it's the other way around, right? So we design the space and then we realize that this space could have something like a skylight, or it could have something else. So with this particular project, it's a really tiny project. So we realized that, you know, we wanted to, the client wanted to extend the floor area by 5 feet in front. And that's when we realized that, you know, he would have to cast a slab there. So it would be a lost opportunity if we did not have a skylight there instead of, you know, instead of having a slab that's been cast. So that's when we decided that we started to explore many different ways of doing skylights. And then we hit upon this idea that we'll, let's have it like an open book or a butterfly truss. And I think to answer your question about the difference between facade and skylight, I think yeah. So with the facade, I think you probably don't need to go with glass that is as durable as with a skylight, because there are lesser chances of damage. There are each of them have their own really interesting ways that you can deal with them. I mean, just because it's glass doesn't mean it's the same thing, right? So with a skylight, you can, you know, there are many experiments that you can do, but there are also limitations in that what kind of space can you have a skylight in? You may not be able to have it in a really private space, maybe. So you'll have to design it in a different way. With facades, I think there are multiple ways of working with facades in that, for example, the project that I showed, Crescendo, the residential project, which had layers. So we essentially have 3 layers in that. So you have the glass is just the middle layer, but the exterior layer is the louvers that open and close, depending on how much light you want, how much privacy you want. And on the inside, you have fabric. So you have, you know, you have curtains, and those are also openable and closable. So you can do permutations and combinations of many different settings and situations. So yeah, you can, and I think also with skylights, I mean, we've done a really geometric kind of skylight, which is quite, I think it was quite a big experiment for us. And so, yeah, it brings in ventilation, or it brings in light inside spaces where we could not have windows. So, you know, facade was not an option there.
So basically, it's about the comfort that is created inside the interior space.
Yeah, I think it's about the design and what the design asks for. And in response to that, there are so many things you can do.
So Hilltop School, again, coming back to it, seems like a very fascinating project. As mentioned, there were constraints of highly contoured site covered with sheetrocks and boulders, close proximity to heritage structures, and as we just discussed, a dense urban context, but also a limited budget since the school is run solely based on individual donations. So what design measures helped you tackle those challenges, and how did you come to the conclusion of leaving the top level bare for the playground?
Right. So in this project, it's really difficult to tell which is the top level or which is the final level and which is the first level. So, so it was kind of, I think, mainly our most of our energy went into tackling the site and the issues that arose from that. So it's not just the site that we, you know, it was really highly contoured and we had to study the site and respond to it. But even after excavation, there were surprises. So we had to adapt to that and respond to or change the design in response to what was you know, being revealed to us as we excavated. So a lot of our work went in that. What was really great is that, and we could save a lot of money, was that the cliff that was existing. So that already formed a wall for us. And in some places, it formed the base of the column as well, so the footing. So nothing is more, solid and more structurally stable than the part of the mountain, the rock itself. So in some of the places, we use that as the footing. We didn't have to build another footing. And yeah, when it comes to measures of, reducing the cost, as I mentioned, we kept most of the walls blank and bare. One reason is just to make the school stand out as a school in this really colorful neighborhood so that people would identify it as a public building. But the more significant reason was to control the costs. So we didn't paint most of the walls. The teachers wanted the classrooms to be painted, so we color coded them and we painted them. But most of the walls that would be, in the common spaces that would have a lot of traffic, we left them bare. And so the money that was saved in that, we were able to invest in other things like fabricating the skylight. And the reason why we left the top floor blank is because one major reason is because this is a heritage zone and it has a height restriction to it. And there was a lot of confusion about which should be considered the zero level and how, where to calculate the height from. Also, this comes under Army jurisdiction now. So we had somebody from the Army come and mark out where our, highest level would be. And that was our restriction. So we had to push everything down and have it built on the side of the cliff. And also, we decided not to have too many classrooms on the top floor because of the view from there. It's a really beautiful panoramic view of the fort on all sides, and you can see the city below because it's at an elevated part of the city. And also, some of the roofs became kind of play courts. So you have the basketball court on the roof. So, and the roof is the same level as the playground.
Right. That's really interesting. So, like you talked to us about some very innovative and different uses of glass in all of your projects, like using it as a facade for the residential project or using it as a skylight for the Hilltop School. So how do you decide which glass to use for which particular project? Like how do you, what parameters do you use to make this decision?
Right. So I think that's something that, the information is available. There is so much of variety for so many different purposes. In fact, there's another project where we used tinted glass that could, you could untint it. So it's kind of a smart use of that. So there are many different varieties of glass that are available. So you could use toughened glass, you could use double glazed. It all depends on where you're going to use it, what the climate is like, and what the heat gain is like. So we do a lot of studies with the heat gain and the daylighting to determine what kind of glass that's required.
So I feel sustainability is a factor that needs to be considered while designing a building, and I'm sure you agree. Is that a conscious choice your firm is also making? And what all strategies have been used in these projects that reduce the negative environmental impact from a built environment?
Right. I think there is this, notion that glass makes buildings unsustainable, but that's not true at all. It depends on how you use a particular material, be it glass or any other material or system. Glass can be really sustainable as well. So with some of our, for example, with the facade that I had shown, we layered it with, with these louvers. So it's almost like you're reducing the heat gain, not just privacy, but the heat as well. With spaces like the really huge skylight that we created for the school, this is not a complete, it's not a complete enclosed space. So imagine if the space it had a slab, then you would not have that natural ventilation because we didn't have any opportunities for ventilation from the sides. The only way we could have ventilation and natural lighting, daylighting was from the top. So a skylight was an obvious choice there. The only thing is that just because there's a skylight doesn't mean that it's an enclosed glass box. It has, gaps under the skylight where the trusses are. It has a perforated wall. So the entire school is kind of a semi-open space. And that's why it's a green building, because you have flow or air circulation throughout the building, and you have zero use of artificial lighting. And because the school is obviously only operational during the daytime, so you don't need to worry about lighting. Every space in the school is naturally ventilated and lit.
Right. So basically, it depends on the context in your research about the site, and the analysts of the site decide
Definitely.
the
The site
which
and
class for the
also the program.
right.
The site and the program.
Okay, so on behalf of all of us at Glass Academy, I'd like to thank you again for sharing your thoughts with us today.